The Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Techtown Detroit is a business incubator and accelerator, helping tech startups and local businesses launch and grow. Techtown supports businesses with co-working, office, meeting, and event space. They also connect entrepreneurs to resources and learning and networking events in Detroit. Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency, but they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families, and they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization doing great stuff all around the state. Hey, greetings, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to the week that was on Deadline Detroit. I'm Craig Fahle. Very, very happy to have you with us today. If you're watching live or listening later or watching later, doesn't matter. The fact that you are here is important to all of us, and we do appreciate it very much. Once again, a very, very strange week as we are, of course, are still under some form of tyrannical lockdown in Michigan, which I know we're going to get into in just a little bit. But I would like to introduce my guests. Once again, Alan Lengel, editor and co-founder of Deadline Detroit, is here. Hello, sir.
Hello, hello, hello.
Also, we have Nancy Derringer from Deadline Detroit. Hello, Nancy.
Hello.
And back again, probably only because he was dumb enough to give me his email address, is Steve Fishman, noted attorney. We appreciate you being here, sir. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. I'm learning a lot about weightlifting from watching Nancy do her little exercises there with a 6-pound weight.
We
There
have
you
to
go.
multitask these days. This is a 10, okay?
Wow.
So just give me a break, all right?
Well, that's
And
more
I'm
than
not
I,
the-
that's more weight than I've lifted in a long, long time.
I
So,
am
you
not
know.
the retired Wolverine hoops sensation that you are, Fishman. So, just leave it at that.
Well, okay. This has been a strange week, and normally, obviously, we go
This
right
has
to
been
the
a
top.
strange week.
We go right to the top. But, this week we get to stay here in our home state for the nuttiness of the week. And a lot of this unfolded yesterday in Lansing. Of course, the legislature was in session yesterday talking about whether or not to allow the governor to extend her emergency powers under this COVID-19 order that we're under right now. And of course, a number of protesters showed up yesterday, several of them armed. We had basically a rally of a bunch of militia people at the Capitol talking about tyranny and calling Governor Whitmer tyrant bitch, among other things. Absolute nuttiness that we have seen in Lansing once again. And I'm telling you, I wonder if these people actually understand the definition of tyranny and why our founding fathers were so fed up with tyranny. I wonder when the last time any of them actually had a foreign army taking all of their assets, using their home as quarters for the troops, killing their crops, eating their food, and then leaving the place. And there was nothing you could do about it. Now that's tyrannical. That I can see.
These
It's
are
not happening here.
These are guys who learned everything they know about tyranny from watching Braveheart. So,
And
many times.
I think one thing they don't have to worry about is the government seizing their common sense.
Look, it's
go ahead.
possible. It is possible to feel a great deal of sympathy for people who are in some of these outlying counties who are not really seeing this disease, who have had to shut down, their lives and their businesses and have been laid off from their jobs. I totally get it. I wouldn't have any problem with a protest that did not go to where these guys have gone in not just this one yesterday, but the one previously with the guns and the abuse, and this is not protest that is helping them. This is protest that I think is hurting them and is hurting the state of Michigan. I mean, I was looking at that famous picture now that the state senator tweeted of the 4 guys standing in the gallery with long guns, which is apparently legal in Michigan. You can take an armed a weapon like that, a firearm into the state legislature. That, I mean, all the Pure Michigan ads in the world are not going to put that aside.
I think, and I kind of
yield
like
the floor.
I like the open carry thing, because like go to Starbucks, you should be carrying like an AK-47, because sometimes they forget your order. And I don't think they'll forget your order if you have an AK-47.
Tyranny.
I think the first thing I would do for these guys who feel it's necessary to carry automatic weapons when they go to the Capitol steps or something like that we should buy all of them jock straps. See, because then they would be confident maybe that in fact they have a penis. They don't need to have their big AK-47 to show that they have a penis, okay? That's the first thing. The second thing, though, when we're talking about this, you know, doesn't it make all of you think there's not a chance in hell we're ever going to get any kind of solidarity? These people who are writing articles about how the pandemic's going to bring us together, et cetera, and so forth.
Oh,
I think they're as far out to lunch as you could be, because these folk just look at the world differently than we do. Let's put it that way. Without even if you don't make a value judgment, which is fairly easy to make, the people who think like this, how are they ever going to come to a meeting of the minds with normal people?
I get,
It's
you know, I
tribalism.
get the thing with the guns, I think people feel so powerless in this whole process. And the idea of them, the guns empower, they give them some sense of empowerment, which I think all of us feel somewhat helpless. I mean, we watch a president who I think, you know, a lot of us think is not up to the task of really leading this country at this time, but is sort of stumbling through it, and it's a powerless feeling. You know?
Well, you know, though, I'm sorry. These guys were allowed to walk into the Capitol carrying these rifles, these long guns. Are you telling me that if a bunch of residents from, say, East Dearborn decided to show up at the state capitol carrying weapons, people of Middle Eastern descent, that these people would be just fine with that? Would the sergeants at arms in the Capitol be okay with that and let them in? I mean, the fact that you can carry a long gun into the Capitol and not carry a sign into the Capitol is just ridiculous.
it is.
I can't tell you how many Black friends of mine I've had that conversation with. What if it was a group of brothers from Grand River, you know, from 12th Street, walking around with long guns in Lansing, Michigan? You want to forget arrest? They'd probably be shot. And yet these guys walk in there as if, you know, they're just going to, like Lengo said, going to the Starbucks just in case they don't bring their food quick enough or something like that.
Well, you are a well read man, Steve and Craig. So you probably know what I believe is the Mulford Act in California, which is the gun control act that was passed by a Republican legislature led by Governor Ronald Reagan. Why? Because the Black Panthers were doing patrols in Oakland with like M1 rifles strapped across their back, loaded. They said they were there to make sure that the police did not abuse the local community. And suddenly that was a problem. You know, that was a huge problem in the 60s.
Hey Nancy, just because I read Cliff Notes in college doesn't mean I'm not well read.
Okay.
That was a notable exclusion there.
I know. It was like, ouch. Wow.
Here's the other thing, though, is that I don't understand the need for the weapons in this protest anyway, because I have not heard Governor Whitmer or any other governor in this country during this crisis talking about how weapons need to be curtailed as a way to fight the coronavirus. It has not been a single, it hasn't been mentioned once. And so
exactly.
It doesn't make any sense to me why they're doing this and what the purpose is, other than to maybe bring attention to the fact that they're worried that someday somebody might try to take their guns, even though it's been over 200 years and we really haven't seen that happen.
It's a political rallying cry for, you know, the Republicans.
It's intimidation.
You know, Trump saying, hey, you know, you vote for a Democrat, you're going to lose your guns.
Right. Go ahead.
I think you're exactly right, Craig. I think you're exactly right. I think that anything that goes on because of the demagogic approach by, you know, the NRA, the Trump, the Republicans, whatever, they go from one thing like, okay, you're not allowed to walk across the street. The next thing you know, they're coming for your guns. I mean, it's crazy and idiotic, but it's an easy rallying cry for those people like, you know, Trump and those right-wing people, and that's what they use it for.
Well,
I think
go ahead, Nance.
We just need to transcribe Steve's speech about the criminal mind and just swap out a few words and then, you know, make it kind of the gun nut mind, because it's very similar. You know, they just, when you're saying it makes no sense why the governor said nothing about guns, why would they be carrying guns? It doesn't have to make sense. They're not looking to make sense. Everything with these guys is about guns.
Well, I have some advice for those, especially the young guys out there who are worried about their right to bear arms and be a part of a well-regulated militia. Well, you can be, guys, and it's called the freaking Army. And here's the great thing about joining the Army.
Right.
They will give you a free gun that has all those restrictions taken off of it. So you won't need to put your bump stock on your gun. You won't need to worry about whether or not it's semi-automatic. No, it'll be fully automatic. And if you're really lucky, they might let you shoot a machine gun. And if you're really lucky, you'll get to fire some mortars. And maybe one day, if you're really lucky, you might actually get to shoot another human being. Wouldn't that be freaking cool? Join the freaking military if you want to do this kind of stuff. Don't be bringing it into the people's house. It's not necessary.
One of the best
Rant off.
I was just rant off. One of the best snaps that I heard yesterday on Twitter was the fact that a lot of those guys look like they've got a lot more than body armor on. Keep giving them bulk, and they were calling them Meal Team 6.
Well, they can emerge from basic training as a lean, mean fighting machine, as John Candy proved in the movie Stripes. So that can be done. But the only thing they have to consider when they join the Army, though, is that they'll have a patch on their shoulder that'll have a flag. It might not be the one they like, though. It'll be the U.S. flag and not the Confederate flag. Confederate flag being worn on a mask by a state senator this week as well. We're from Michigan. We're the Union people. We lost relatives in this fight. Many of us who've been here for a long, long time have great-great-grandfathers that lost their lives in the Civil War fighting for the Union, not the Confederacy. And this notion that we can't forget our history, okay, we can teach history, but we got to remind people who the losers were in that battle and that they were on the wrong side of that history and continue to be on the wrong side of that history. All you're showing off by waving a Confederate flag is that you're a dumbass.
Maybe Dale Zorn could give them a briefing, because he feels very strongly about this. So.
I think it's a little more than that, though, too. It's not just the fact of wearing it. What's really been aggravating to me lately when this kind of discussion has been held is how many people still are touting that old canard. Oh, that was all about states' rights. The Civil War was about states' rights. Who in the hell are you kidding? The Civil War was about slavery. And if you want to wear a Confederate flag, what it means to me is you support slavery. And what it should mean to anybody black, particularly anybody that might vote. I don't know where this guy is from. There's probably no black people in his district. But it's pretty obvious to anybody that's lived a little life and read a little history. We're not talking about the right of the states to regulate Starbucks. We're talking about slavery.
The right of the states to regulate slavery.
And to know, for some people, when they talk about slavery, it was never a good idea. It was never acceptable in human.
Well, I'm pretty sure the Bible covers that pretty extensively.
Yeah.
The whole Exodus chapter, I think, is pretty much about
it's
that.
An ugly, it's just an ugly chapter. I mean, it's when we see the swastikas up there in Lansing, with Hitler references to Whitmer and the swastikas and stuff like that, and it's an ugly comparison. I know. People get angry on Facebook if somebody says, "Hey, don't compare Trump to Hitler," or, blah, blah, blah. So, I don't know.
Okay. Well, it's been remarkable to watch, though. Quick question, though, and a legitimate question. Is there an argument to be made that the governor is overstepping her boundaries with these executive orders and with this extension of this, or does the legislature need to go along? I mean, I think there is going to be an interesting legal fight on this question. I
think the argument is, there's certainly an argument to be made and say, you're being too restrictive. And particularly, as Nancy points out, some of the counties where there's been a low number. However, I think it's up to the governor, who is trying to be as careful as possible, who's consulting with doctors and scientists, and making a decision based on that life takes top priority. But her point also is that if we don't get it under control, the economy is never coming back.
Right.
If people are constantly dying and we have to keep shutting down again the economy, she's trying to do it in a smart way. Not everyone has to agree with it, and maybe in the end it's not the smartest way, but it looks pretty smart to me.
Well, let me tell you this. One way of judging it. There was that court challenge that wound up in the Court of Claims. The Court of Claims in Michigan Court of Appeals judges hear those kinds of cases. Judge Christopher Murray, who's anybody's definition of a conservative judge, he presided over that case, and he found and ruled that she had the right to do it, that it wasn't outrageous, it wasn't somehow infringing on people's rights to the extent that the court should get involved in it. And that, to me, is the actual way conservatives are supposed to interpret the law. It's supposed to be the same no matter whether it's a so-called liberal governor or a conservative governor. And I think that that's a pretty good example of a fair-minded judge. Now, what his own opinion was, who knows? Maybe he feels, it's a little restrictive. But by the law, which is what we're supposed to go by, he ruled that she was within her powers and her rights to do it.
Well, what's interesting too is we're watching this. I was driving by a golf course the other day, and I saw a bunch of people out there walking, golfing. So that's been removed. People can go boating again. It is funny. I never see any of these people protesting to reopen the library. I mean, it's just, and this is the stuff that really troubles me a little bit. Nobody's like, the schools need to be open, the libraries. No, they're talking about, golf courses and boats and stuff like that.
Well, but wait, Craig, they are, including Trump, they're making a big stink. I mean, you saw what Trump said, was it yesterday, the day before? Schools should reopen. Think about that. Mm-hmm. Think about what you're asking people to do. You're going to be asking people to come from their own separate houses, who knows who they're living with and who knows what conditions they have. You're going to be asking teachers, not to mention just the janitors and the cleaning people, to all show up in an enclosed area. At this point in time, it's really kind of insane.
You're asking parents to sacrifice their children for the sake of, hey, let's reopen, the economy.
Well, and that brings up my next legal question, though, and this is an important one because, Mitch McConnell now, is in talks to reopen the economy, is trying to find a way to make sure that corporations are shielded from liability if they bring back their workers too soon and don't put them in a safe work environment. And these people catch COVID, say, working in a meat plant or something like that, or at an auto plant or whatever. If there's a COVID, contagion that happens as a result of this, they want to make sure that these companies don't have any liability here. And I'm going to ask the lawyer, Steve. It seems to me that these liability cases are going to be all over the place.
I would say, and you're asking really the wrong person since I'm a criminal lawyer, but Ben Johnson is one of my closest friends. We've had discussions about not specifically this subject, but just in general, whether there'll be lawsuits. People, I think you got to make a distinction when you have a guy as the president who orders the meatpacking people to go back to work. Now you got a very interesting legal analysis there. If you have no choice, if you order the owners to stay open and they order their employees to come there and work 2 feet from each other, I can't imagine that there wouldn't be lawsuits that would result from that. On the other hand, what if it's the owners themselves without any mandate from the government, from the president, the governor, whoever? The owners order someone back. It would seem to me, again, I'm only a criminal lawyer, but it would seem to me that you have a responsibility to make the place as safe as possible. I don't know if you guys read or we talked about, Nolan Finley had a column, because he's been banging the drum for reopening.
Oh, yeah.
He had a column about a guy, a small business owner, who was in an essential business. I don't recall what it was, but they had only one illness, no deaths, but the things that he had in place in terms of taking temperatures and wiping everything down and keeping people, that kind of stuff, I think, is going to have to be necessary if you want to protect yourself against lawsuits.
Well, interestingly enough, though, if the government and the president is ordering, the meat processing plants to reopen, is he providing the funding necessary to make these places safe? Because if not, that's an unfunded mandate. And last I checked, conservatives hate those as well. So there's going to have to be the money that goes along with it to make these places safe. And I haven't seen anybody talking about that yet.
No.
I was going to say real quick, when we're talking about unity and stuff like that, and Trump tweeted this morning about the governor saying, you need to loosen things up, which is
these are great people.
Creating such divisiveness there. But on a positive note, I read there was an article about Hamas, who has been quietly sending doctors to Israel to be trained how to deal with the COVID-19, and which is a huge leap considering that Hamas doesn't recognize the existence of Israel and they're sending their doctors there. So I think that was kind of a cool story of unity and,
Go to that blank place on the map and learn something, right? That's how they do it. So,
well, okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about what's been going on in Washington, though, this week. I think the biggest goof anybody made this week was probably Vice President Mike Pence going to the Mayo Clinic
and not wearing a mask in the Mayo Clinic and saying he didn't want to wear the mask because he wanted to look them in the eye. Which
How did
was
you know?
great.
How did you know my nominee for Schmuck of the Week? How did you do that?
Okay, well, I apologize. I ripped the Band-Aid off of that one. But okay, Steve, make a case for him being Schmuck of the Week.
Well, he's pretty much a contender for Schmuck of the Week every week, as long as he toadies along behind Trump and kisses his behind and does all the things that we've seen for 3 years. But this particular one and his so-called explanation, and then denying that the Mayo Clinic had sent out this notice, basically. My question, I mean, the Schmuck of the Week part is obvious, but my question is, are we really at the point where no matter what the rules are, if you're the president or the vice president, if it was my place, if I'm running the Mayo Clinic, I don't give a shit if he's Mike Pence vice president or he's Mike Pence senator or he's Mike Pence dog catcher. He ain't coming in without a mask. That's all there is to it.
Right.
What do you guys think of that?
He just looked like such a fool. He looked like a guy just so out of place. It was like one of those Where's Waldo things. Like
Science happens there.
But why do you think they let him in? Why did they let him in?
You think they would have said, Mr. Vice President, that's a policy here. I mean, he just looked foolish. And then his wife said, "Oh, he didn't know there was a policy."
I know, but she's a liar just like him. You're not answering my question. Why is it? It's the same thing I asked last week about the reporters. These guys are not entitled to this kind of deference. They forfeit it when they behave the way they do. When you behave the way Trump behaves around reporters, or when you behave the way Pence behaves, walking into the goddamn Mayo Clinic of all places. It's not like he's walking to some urgent care on 7 Mile. He goes in the Mayo Clinic and nobody has the chutzpah, that's the nerve, or the besom, that's the balls, to stop him and say, "Sir, you're not coming in like this. You have a choice, just like the rest of us. You can put on a mask or you can go home. Okay, and you can take your little entourage with you." Why is it? What is it that's intimidating to regular people that they can't bring themselves to do something like that?
I heard of an anecdote about a famous Detroit media personality who was trying to get into the Fisher building after 9/11, when they had imposed everyone who gets into this building or goes above a certain floor must show an ID. It doesn't matter who you are, no exceptions. Everyone has to do it. And apparently he forgot his ID that day and played the "Don't you know who I am" card. And
the Mitch Albom card.
I don't know if this story is true. I just heard it from somebody. But the point is that security guard stood up to, this famous Detroit media personality, and they should have stood up to Mike Pence. And the idea that I want to look them in the eye, it's like, do you know how you actually wear these things? I mean, for crying out loud. So
You know what it shows? It shows he's so dumb that if he thinks he needed to not have a mask to look someone in the eye, when he goes to drink the Clorox, he'll probably pour it in his ear.
Which I think would be just as harmful. Actually, it's probably not very good for your ears either, but who knows? Oh, speaking of cures, I've come to the conclusion this is a Diet Ruby Red Squirt. And just preface this, everybody,
Wow.
This is a joke I am making here, but I have not yet contracted the coronavirus. And I'm thinking this is basically all I've been drinking lately is this stuff.
Prophylactic.
So I think that it's Ruby Red Squirt might be the cure. Might be the
What
miracle
does-
cure. And so it's just a matter of time before I get in touch with Dr. Oz to start pimping it on Fox News, and I'll be in good shape.
What does
I'm
Ruby
sticking with
Red
Camus.
Squirt taste like? What is the ruby flavor?
It's some sort of berry mixed in with grapefruit.
I see.
So,
Okay.
It's
Okay.
tasty.
All right.
But yeah, I'm convinced. So I've been drinking a lot of this stuff. So therefore, this must be the reason
I am
that I don't
slowly losing my mind. The only time I get out of the house, of course, I go for a little bit of exercise when it's nice enough to ride my bike, and I also go to the grocery store. And the last time I was at the grocery store, I came home with a 12-pack of Tab. And
Nice.
I thought,
Wow.
this is it. I mean, the next step is getting 14 cats.
Well, do you
and,
remember when saccharin
becoming
was
a
all we had to
hoarder.
worry about? Saccharin, remember?
Yeah,
That stuff was...
that was quite something. Yeah. Right?
Dangerous.
We all worried about it. Yeah.
Should have had a lockdown for saccharin.
Yeah.
Well, getting back to the subject at hand here, the president, after his disastrous press briefing talking about Clorox and such, decided that he was going to cut this off and not do any more of these. Well, that lasted all of about 6 hours because he showed up the very next day, and he has been showing up at these briefings some more and saying things and tweeting things and doing all the stuff. And now his own team apparently is showing him some data suggesting that he is shooting himself in the foot every time he goes up there. And all he does is scream at them and say, your polling data must be wrong. Internal polling shows him getting his ass kicked in many, many important states this time around. And he refuses to believe it. And instead basically threatens the people that are working for him to come up with some better numbers.
I think his strategy right now is to try to get the economy going and hope that the second wave comes after the election so that he can get his numbers back up in terms of, unemployment, gross national, the GNP and all that. I think that's the strategy. He can't believe that the biggest things that he was able to tout, people's 401ks, the economy, unemployment, is all shot. It's gone. And
people don't care.
He's devastated only because of the numbers, not because of the human consequences.
Okay, right. So wait, again, we always have to keep in mind, Lengel, you were trying to do an analysis. If you were a normal person with a normal brain, okay? Remember, this is the criminal mind, not the regular mind, the criminal mind, and you're trying to assess it as if he's a regular person. You have to understand, though, in addition to the criminal mind, he has kind of a subset of the criminal mind, which is the junkie mind. And while he doesn't use drugs or drink, he is a junkie for attention. He is a junkie for publicity. So when Craig says, when he first came out and said he's not going to do it because his people are telling him don't do it, I'm thinking to myself, really? I've seen a lot of junkies out in the street said they ain't doing it either. And 2 hours later, they got that needle in their arm.
And he's a more higher brow term is narcissist. He's mainlining all that stuff. He just loves it. He doesn't care the consequences.
I'm in favor of the lower brow terms, and I'll tell you why. The criminal mind, the junkie, because that's the level that he deserves to be talked about at.
Yes.
Okay? He's not a regular person.
Hallelujah.
He's not someone. He deserves to be talked about as just what he is, a career criminal who's a junkie. And he happens to be a junkie for attention. If you want to call it narcissism, I'm sure it is. But in street talk, he's just another junkie. Okay?
Yeah.
He's waiting on the man, as Lou Reed sang. Right.
Well, okay. A few more things we've got to get to before we go full bore into schmuck of the week. But Joe Biden came out this morning on Morning Joe with Mika, grilling him over the coals over documents at the University of Delaware related to this alleged sexual assault that took place in his office some 20 years ago. He flatly denied the allegations. I don't see where. I'm not sure what kind of evidence there could possibly be to prove it one way or the other, which puts him in a really interesting position. You either believe him or you don't at this point in time. Democrats now trying to walk this tightrope about whether or not they want to believe women or not believe this one woman. This is a weird spot a lot of people are finding themselves in because they went all in on Kavanaugh, and now with this Joe Biden thing, say it ain't so, Joe, hopefully. I'm not sure what to do with this one.
I would say I knew he was going to deny it. His other option would have been to say something happened. I thought it was consensual. They're, describing it as a sexual assault is totally false or whatever. He could have taken that route, but the route in Washington is normally just denied unless there is just an eyewitness there. And the best they have some people where she told a couple people about it,
which is the best you can do when you're talking about something that's decades old.
So I think it leaves a lot of people thinking something happened. Who knows exactly what happened, but we certainly wanted to believe the woman, with Brett Kavanaugh, and now a woman who's coming in with, she's not a Republican, she's not somebody who's.
You know what? Here's my cut to the chase.
Sure.
What's the alternative? I was backing Elizabeth Warren. If they want to drag Elizabeth Warren up and not make her the nominee, but what is the alternative? Say he did it, what are we going to do to him? What if he came up and he said, and he gave that, we were necking or something, and I thought it was consensual. What if he did that? What would we do? What's our alternative? The question is, say Biden did it. The question is, do we choose this man with a sexual assault in his past,
or
do we
Satan,
or do we pick the other man who has something like 27, credible claims of sexual assault against? Go ahead.
Let me toss this in there.
Okay.
I think that both sides, people have been too quick to jump in on the side of whatever it is that the allegation is. I think Franken was run out of town. I thought that was way excessive for even what I saw, everybody saw.
I agree.
The tape.
I agree with that.
I think that Kavanaugh, quite frankly, I think people went a little bit over the top because they didn't like the guy. They didn't want him to be there, blah, 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 blah. But when you start talking about someone who can't remember where it is that it took place, let alone, what exactly happened. This thing here, if I'm Biden, and I don't know what you just said, Alan, about that he went on Morning Joe, I never did anything like that. This is what I would be. There's not any doubt from what all the women have said for his whole career. He's a handsy guy, a touchy guy, but I don't have to tell Nancy. Maybe I have to tell you two schlubs. But there's a big difference between hugging on someone, patting them on the head, and sticking your hand down someone's pants. That is not something you can say, oh, yeah, well, it was consensual. Really?
No, that's something Donald Trump has admitted to doing.
Yeah.
But my point being is that I don't see any way around him saying, look, I've already talked about it. I've told you. You've had other people say, yes, I'm a touchy-feely. I never did that. Because that's criminal sexual conduct. That's what it is. And it's not going to be you can't give an answer that, oh, yeah, we thought we were necking where? In a hallway? Who are you, Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton were getting blowjobs in a closet? Are you kidding me?
He had to get away from the Secret Service.
but my point being, I think the only thing he can say, it's not discrediting anyone. And then you just let the facts speak for themselves. The lady has talked about it how many times over all this time, including saying at one time he was too handsy. This is a big difference between being handsy, tapping someone on the head, and doing what she's now saying he did. And I think that if it's presented like that, I think that mass of the public will agree with it. But when you have Kirsten Gillibrand, who ran Franken out of the Congress, basically, turning around and just saying, well, I believe the vice president, he hadn't said anything by then.
I'm sorry.
That I think is difficult.
You said something that, can you repeat that? You said something about agreed. People will agree with.
I think people would accept the explanation that it sounds like, one would hope that he's going to give, which is, look, I never did that. I can tell you that for sure. Can I say I didn't, I was a little too handsy, whatever it was he said, when all these other people came forward. I'm the touchy-feely type of guy, but there's a big difference between being touchy-feely and doing what she said. And I never did that. I would never do that to any woman. And then he can talk about all the things he's done, the Violence Against Women Act and things like that. And I think people would accept that. I really do. He is a touchy guy. And a lot of people, even in our generation, it was different. It just was different in terms of, you'd put your hand on someone's back to talk to them. Now, who knows what someone's going to say? You don't do it anymore.
So the question is, how much legs does this thing have in terms of, through the campaign?
I think until the, document search is complete as to whether or not this complaint even exists anywhere. And it would exist technically if she made an actual allegation. There should be some documentation somewhere about it within the Library of Congress. That's where they got to look. And if there's something there, then there's something there. But if there's not, there's not. But he flatly denied that it ever took place.
Not, if he handles it in the way I'm suggesting, I think it has no legs. You're running against a serial sex offender.
Right.
It's not like you're running against Jimmy Carter, who only had it in his heart.
Lost it in his heart. That's right.
You're running against a serial sex offender. So as long as he doesn't make an ass out of himself, which is kind of what you worry about on every other subject too with him, you never know. I don't think it'll have legs unless, like Craig says, if there's a police report that's buried somewhere or something,
and there isn't, from what I understand, but we don't know yet. But either way, all right, okay, we've got to move on because we're running out of time. It's time for Schmuck of the Week. We already know Steve Fishman's candidate. That would be, of course, Vice President Mike Pence, for not wearing a mask at the Mayo Clinic. And I think that's
not just that, and his commentary afterward. You can't leave that out because a fourth grader would have known better than to say, I really needed to see the people I was talking to. So it's not just the behavior, it's the idiocy that post-dated the behavior.
Okay, okay. Let's go with Alan Langell here.
I'd have to go with Mike Pence. I mean, he's the most obvious dude there. I mean, he's really he's just such an odd duck there. I mean, he's such a there's a certain mystery to the guy. Like, who is that guy? He's so like robotic. It's just weird. It's like it's almost he is a robot. I mean, he's just sort of programmed to suck up to Trump, and
I think we're going to find out in the fullness of time that he was on some serious drugs, the kind of drugs that you can't even get on the street.
Mike Pence.
Yeah.
Hallucinogenics. Acid.
There's something about those weird eyes of his that are just kind of simultaneously dead, but he never really, he never falters. He just, like you said, he's Westworld. He's like something out of Westworld. He's a robot programmed to praise Trump. So
well, okay,
so you
Nancy,
vote with us, Nancy?
Where's your vote going?
Yeah.
My vote is going to somebody that if you're not extremely online or even a little online, you probably have never heard of, which is Ben Shapiro, who is a very
guy.
He's a very short,
that's sarcasm,
fast-talking conservative commentator who said this week
a yiddle for sure, Lingo.
Yeah.
He said, if someone who is 81 dies of COVID-19, that is not the same thing as somebody who is 30 dying of COVID-19. If grandma dies in a nursing home at 81, that's tragic and it's terrible. Also, the life expectancy in the United States is 80.
Translation.
Wow.
If a black person dies, it's not the same as a white person.
Throw mama from the train.
So
throw
wait,
grandmama from the train.
If you make it to 81, you're playing with house money, so you're dying is okay.
Exactly. It's okay. So.
All right. Well, I've got another person for Schmuck of the Week, and this is another bottom feeder like Ben Shapiro, a guy named Jerome Corsi, who has been trolling around in the conservative media circles for a long time. He has been pushing this guy, Vladimir Zelenko. He's a doctor who's been touting hydrochloroquine as a cure, and has been suggesting that he's part of this FDA-approved study on the drug, which he is not. And so he's been getting some sort of scrutiny about this. Well, Jerome Corsi has been really helping this guy push this out there to all these different media organizations. They're collaborating on a website designed to connect people with doctors and get them hydrochloric, whatever you want to call it. So Corsi's been doing this, but already the federal government is looking very carefully at anybody peddling false cures, peddling drugs, hoarding things, price gouging. They've been going after a lot of these folks. Well, here's what Corsi did. So he's been talking to Zelenko. He accidentally sent an email that was supposed to go to Zelenko to a guy named Aaron Zelinsky. Now, Aaron Zelinsky happens to be a federal prosecutor who was a member of Robert Mueller's team, and he had been looking at Corsi's activities during the 2016 election. And now this Zelinsky guy is actually looking into all these things around the coronavirus. And now apparently they've reopened an investigation into Jerome Corsi again. So his own stupidity gets him in trouble with the feds. So way to go, Jerome Corsi, my Schmuck of the Week.
I have one. I just remember there's a doctor from Macomb County who was just charged with, he has a varicose vein, mill, a bunch of clinics, and he was treating patients for giving them vitamin C injections and stuff, mixing patients with COVID in the office with non-COVID. Some of at least 5 of the people on his staff had COVID. They were treating patients. I mean, just a total nightmare and a total inconsideration. And he was taking advantage of the fact these were non-essential. Some were procedures non-essential. So he was taking advantage of the fact that all his competitors were closed, and he was.
Well, and not to mention, Alan, the other thing that they busted him for while they were looking into the other stuff that you were referring to, he got caught prescribing drugs for conditions that he had already treated through surgery. So, so he had been defrauding the federal government and the Medicare system for a while. So they got him for that too.
He was giving injections.
Yeah, vitamin C injections.
For veins that had already been surgically removed.
Yes. And so, and he'd been prescribing it and charging the Medicare system for it. So he's in a little bit of trouble. Yeah, guys like that. I think anybody that's taking advantage of this situation and defrauding people in any way in regards to this, they're automatically going to be Schmuck of the Century people, because that is the lowest of the low.
Yes. Very much so.
I would say
True.
that. So
And
we're seeing the
can we
criminal
give a
mind in
shout out
action
to our
all over the
M&M
place.
story?
Oh yeah, no. Well, this is what I wanted to get to here because we do like to end on something that's really, really cool. And Alan, I'll let you sort of hype this a little bit, but there's a great story on DeadlineDetroit.com right now about our hometown hero Eminem from a very unlikely place.
That's a good one.
Have you seen that? It's really a great story. It's by Danny Fenster, who's grew up in Huntington Woods, and he is now a editor and reporter for a paper in Myanmar, a news service, independent news service. And his boss, he was telling me last night, his boss served 7 years for human rights violations. They put him away for 7 years, and now a lot of the people he's working with at the paper are really reporting on a lot of human rights violations and stuff like that. Really,
Lingle,
yes.
could you get to the point here? We're not talking about human rights in Myanmar.
I'm sorry. Anyways,
that's tyranny, though. That's real tyranny, folks.
It is tyranny.
A guy in Myanmar has started a restaurant, and it's sort of a shrine to Eminem. And all these backpackers who are coming from around the world are now stopping there. It's basically it's a restaurant and bar. I mean, they serve primarily like curry Indian type food, and the guy loves Detroit. He's not been to Detroit. He loves Eminem. He tries to talk like Eminem. He's got all this Eminem memorabilia around.
Well,
Lingle,
what I love is that he basically learned
ahead,
the
Nancy.
English
You're
language.
not doing a very good job about this.
The English language by listening to Eminem records. And when you see the quotes from this guy,
Nancy, that's why.
It's not that. It's that the thing that I loved about this story is that it touches on so many kind of layers of the human experience. It's about trying to find your place in the world. It's about being knocked down and refusing to stay there. It's about, rising above. His story is basically the 8 Mile story, but in Burma,
Myanmar.
or Myanmar,
Well,
Burma.
That's what I meant to say, Nancy.
It's also really, really well written, and
Yes.
the thing about it too is that the quotes from this restaurant owner in Myanmar are hilarious because you can tell that he learned to speak English by listening to Eminem records.
Because it's like, he calls. I mean, it's like obscenity throughout, and this yo dog, and I really want his T-shirt too. So the one that was described in there, his D12 T-shirt.
And one last little detail is that Danny Fenster took him a 14-hour bus ride to get there.
Wow.
Yeah.
From Rangoon or Yangon.
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable.
I mean, it was something he'd been wanting to go to, and he said the guy just loved it that he was from Detroit. He just ate that up. So.
Well, the story is at DeadlineDetroit.com. If you want to read it yourself, I shared it out on my Facebook page this morning, also on Twitter, I believe. So if you were looking for that story, it's not hard to find, DeadlineDetroit.com. But it really is a nice ode to our city and a great story of perseverance and a lot of fun to read. That's the most important thing here.
Yeah, it's a great
check it out. We appreciate it very much, and really, really great job by Mr. Fenster on that story. It's just the kind of thing you don't get to read very often, and it's a lot of fun. All right, so
I thought you guys were going to talk about Eminem grabbing the guy that broke in his house. Did you see that?
Oh, I did see that, but not pressing any charges.
Apparently. I didn't know that Lingle was going to take me to Burma, and we were just talking about him grabbing the guy and boom, and that's it.
He did. Eminem. Somebody tried to break into Eminem's house by throwing a rock through the window. It sounds like
think about it, Nance. Think about it. He's got a security detail, right?
Yeah.
And it said in the paper, and this guy's obviously a moron, the guy who tried to
Plus
he must be a weak moron because Eminem subdued him and he weighs about 100.
Yeah.
So the security detail didn't bother to be in the back.
They were only out front?
Was in the front. And he threw the rock through the back. Now, these are some guys I might have to have a conversation with. I'm paying you guys for security, and you figure somehow the only way someone will come in is through the front?
All right, we got to wrap up here in just a second. Real quick, what's everybody watching this weekend, and what's everybody doing? It's going to be nice, 70 degrees and sunny Saturday.
I'm watching Bosch on Amazon.
Okay,
pretty good.
That's a good one.
Good one.
I'll probably do another episode of Fahle, and I'm going to ride my bike a lot.
Good.
Okay, you guys know I don't watch TV. So,
I know.
And I don't watch movies. So
what are you reading?
I'll be outside, get a little running in, do whatever we can outside. There's not a whole hell of a lot to do, as we all know, when you're sentenced to home confinement.
Yeah.
Well, Killing Eve is my recommendation right now. A great series from the BBC, which is a lot of fun. I like it very much. And yes, some vigorous walking in the sunshine is due for all of us, I think. So
Okay.
I had a couple conversations this morning on the phone, and at the end, I'd say, "Have a great weekend," and then I'd pause and I'd say, "Well, have a good one."
That's basically it. All right. Hey, thanks to Samaritas for sponsoring this broadcast. Big thanks to Michael Lucido as well for engineering it today. The Zoom stuff seems to be working okay. I'm getting used to this. Nancy, you got a band to hype there on your T-shirt?
Yes, this is my daughter's band, Shadow Show.
Yeah, they're quite good. They've got a video out there. It's a lot of fun.
Trajectory for success until pandemic shut down their little boat.
Yeah, they were headed to South by Southwest this year
They
until it got shut
It's
down.
going to be a great time for them anyway.
Well, absolutely.
Right. We got to wrap.
All right. Well, we've got to wrap it up. Thanks everybody for watching. We really do appreciate it. Again, look for this in podcast form a little bit later on today. The video will be up on Deadline Detroit tomorrow. We appreciate everybody checking it out, sharing it, liking it, all that kind of stuff. It's a big deal and it all does help. Steve Fishman, thank you once again for joining us. We appreciate it very much. Pretty soon he's going to be moved up from the and the rest status like they used to do on Gilligan's Island before the Professor and Marianne got their chops. And then, of course, he'll just be like Steve Fishman, regular guest on the program. So that'll work.
The pay will be the same, though, right? Zero?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hey, you're supporting local journalism, my friend.
I don't need an agent then to negotiate zero. Okay. I'll do it myself.
Nancy, thank you as well. We appreciate it. And nice to see you got your workout in during the broadcast today. That's fun.
All right.
And Alan Lengel, thank you. And take us out, sir.
Thanks very much. And stay home safely.
The Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Techtown Detroit is a business incubator and accelerator, helping tech startups and local businesses launch and grow. Techtown supports businesses with co-working, office, meeting, and event space. They also connect entrepreneurs to resources and learning and networking events in Detroit. Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization doing great stuff all around the state.